Why save and invest? It's a rhetorical question, but let's think through it. When you save and invest, you're sharing financial resources with your future self. This means your future self won't have to worry about earning money. With that financial freedom, you gain time, the time you would have spent working. And with more time, you have more freedom to choose how you want to spend your time. You might ask yourself, what do I want to do with my time? Maybe it's traveling, exercise, or catching up on sleep. But then what? That question often leads to something deeper, finding your purpose. That's the topic my friend Jordan Grumet, aka Doc G, knows a lot about. As a hospice doctor and the author of The Purpose Code, Jordan has explored purpose, connection, and identity in depth. In this episode, he shares insights from his latest book and helps answer the question, how do I find my purpose? Or if it needs to be found at all. If you've been reflecting on your purpose, well, buckle up. This is the episode for you. Get ready for the thought-provoking conversation with the hospice doctor and author of the newly minted book, The Purpose Code, Jordan Grumet. You know those moments where you think, I wish I would have learned this in school? Those are the topics that we love to talk about. Join me each week as I interview experts sharing their strategies for solving problems that us young adults will face throughout our 20s and 30s. So what are you waiting for? If you want new episodes about adulting advice every Monday, hit that follow button. Yeah, I'm doing my best to make sure it's just a fun hobby and almost a treasure hunt. Like, I really love finding these cards at garage sales, and it's easy to go to eBay or somewhere else and just buy the cards. And on occasion, I'm going to have to buy a few cards to fill out the collections that I'm looking for, but I'm having such a thrill over the last year or two, just like going to garage sales, not knowing they're going to be there. And then somebody has a binder laying out and I'm like, whoa, kid in a candy shop. And I'm going crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, these are the kind of things we live for. And it may or may not come to pass that you'll meet other people who do this and you'll talk about it. Maybe you'll end up having the Pokemon podcast, like the Pokemon podcast or Pokemon collector podcast, or, maybe you'll buy and sell them. Maybe you'll meet other people who do this. But the point is, it leads to something so much more and more rich. And it sounds kind of silly. I'm just kind of doing something I loved in childhood. But I think the meaning it has to us and that joy it brings about. We talk a lot about achievements. I think neurochemically what happens with an achievement or making money or those kind of things, we get this fast dopamine hit. But what's really exciting is when you do something long-term like collecting, of course there are those dopamine hits, right? When you walk into the garage sale and find the book full of Pokemon cards, that's like that quick dopamine hit. But really what we're building is this more long-term version of joy, which I think has more to do with neurohormones like oxytocin, where they're a lot healthier. They're not up and down. They're not as addictive the way dopamine is addictive. And I think this, the more of these kind of climbs, as I call them in the book, but these more long-term ventures we get ourselves excited about, the more oxytocin we have, the more of those kind of good feeling neurohormones we wake up with every morning. And that's kind of like the cool thing about these long-term passions. If we just allow ourselves to be engaged in them, I think it has like amazing things neurochemically, as well as just that sense of joy.
Yeah, the only thing I'm currently struggling with is like the minimalist take in all of this too, but I was really never a collector of anything. My parents were like always getting rid of stuff, and that just kind of like, I felt like I needed to follow and do the very same thing until I met my girlfriend, and she has many of collections. She had a house fire when she was young, lost everything. So she kind of went the opposite direction of me, and she was like, I lost all these things that I loved. Now I'm like not getting rid of anything that I might potentially want to hold on to later on. And we both find a healthy balance. I don't know if I need 30 or 40 different collections of things, snow globes and postcards and stamps and whatnot, but it has been nice and joyful to revisit, especially some of the things from my childhood and collect some of those, and then just also allow myself to lean into some other collections. Like plants recently over the last few years has been something that I've been getting more and more into. And it's an amazing hobby and something that brings me a lot of joy. And whenever I started thinking about purpose and the things that I would do, even if I didn't get paid for them, like taking care of my plants, gardening, being outside, piddling in the yard, those are all things that really come to mind to me. So I'm glad that I leaned into that a little bit more.
Think about this. I've never met a serious collector who's unhappy. Find someone who collects something and they really like what they're collecting. these are like the happiest people. They are always searching for the next find. They're always getting excited. They're always getting involved in things. I mean, you want to be a happy person? Collect something. Seriously.
That's actually really surprising. So I do a lot of garage sales, and a side hustle of mine is flipping. I find things and essentially price arbitrage and resell them on Marketplace. I have, I don't know, a couple of dozen people, though, that are in like my quick list of their collectors, and they're looking for very specific things. And they know I'm a finder. So they're like, anytime you find these, buy these for me, and I will buy them from you. And I'm like, sweet. So I have those. And you're right. Like, the people that are routinely buying those things for their collection from me, so happy. They're so excited. Every time that they come over to buy it from me, they like immediately rip it open and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to add this to my collection. I do think it's a really happy and just like good feeling activity. I do think most people should probably have a collection of some sorts.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, right? Because now when you go to a garage sale and you see something, you light up. You're like, oh, this person's going to love this. And it even transcends the money. You might be like, okay, I can make a little money on this. But my bet is when you walk in and you see that thing, the joy is like, I can get this and this person's going to love this. And it's like, it's what Kenda Honda calls happy money. It's this idea that money goes out, you buy things that make you happy, or you do things that make you money that make you happy. And then you put that money back out in the world for worthy causes to make other people happy. Yeah, it's this wonderful mix of connecting to people and doing fun things and seeing other people light up when they're in the midst of something that feels deeply purposeful to them, right? You're not going to change the world by collecting Pokemon cards, or I say that because most of us can't see the connection, but I'd argue actually you might, because those people you connect to and the people you touch form your community, and your goodness, your interaction with them changes the world. It changes the people around you and they change the people around them. And all of a sudden, years away, years in the future and miles away, someone else's life is being touched by your act of kindness that you didn't even think about. You were just doing something that seemed fun and purposeful to you.
Yeah, that's definitely something I was thinking a lot about when I was reading your book, this connection community aspect. And we'll get into the difference between little p and big P, because I think that's probably got to fit into this conversation well. But you just like helped reassure me too that it's not about this like millions of people that you're trying to impact, but maybe just tens of or hundreds of people that you're trying to impact. And you're right. Like didn't really think about it that way, but I do have a list of things that people ask me to be on the lookout for at garage sales. And I can think of one right now. Hannah, my brother's girlfriend, she's a teacher, and teachers are underpaid. They have to pay for a bunch of stuff. And she's like, hey, my classroom is always looking for highlighters, color pencils. She just kind of went down the list. And she's like, I buy them when I need to, but if you find them at garage sales for cheap, please pick them up for me. I will pay you back for them. And it has been so much fun helping her kind of build out her classroom on pennies on the dollar, it feels like too. I'm just like, yeah, I got like this entire bag of markers or colored pencils or something. She's like, that would have cost me like $80 on Amazon, and you got it for $1.
And let's look at that impact of that. So you're doing something you like doing. Little p purpose for you, something you like the process of doing, is bargain hunting and going to garage sales. So this is fulfilling your sense of purpose. You can find something which connects you to your brother's girlfriend and helps her do her purpose, because her purpose is teaching and creating and helping other kids. You find something at a garage sale, a bunch of markers, you buy them, you hand them to her, she brings them into the classroom. Maybe there's an underserved person, a poor person, a person who doesn't have access to these things. They take those markers, they start drawing and painting and decide that this lights them up and is beautiful and wonderful. They go out into the world, they become an artist. Their artwork speaks to someone at a difficult time in their life and makes their life better. And boom, your little action of doing something that was important to you, that was lighting you up, this selfish thing of pursuing purpose, not big, audacious purpose that's going to change the world, but little p purpose, the kind you enjoy the process of doing these things. All of a sudden, your simple actions are affecting more and more people. You're changing the world, and you're doing it subconsciously by just getting involved in what lights you up, what connects you to other people, because your hobby, your joy connects you to Hannah, and Hannah's hobby and her joy connects her to her students. And that's not just the key ingredient to happiness, but to impact. to legacy, to the fact that one day, sadly, you will leave this earth, but your actions will affect others. And that ripple in the ocean can continue for, again, years and years past the time you die, miles and miles away from your house. Someone will do something because you took the first step all those years before.
Yeah. The impact that you can have generations from now is really incredible when you're pursuing your little p purpose.
Very much so. And so people get caught up with this idea, I need a big, audacious purpose, big P purpose, something that changes the world. I need to be the president. I need to go to the moon. I need to be a Major League Baseball player. That's wonderful. But the problem with big, audacious purpose, goal-oriented purpose is most people will never succeed. Unfortunately, you may be the wrong person at the wrong time. You might have the wrong genetics, or God forbid, you just don't have the best of luck. There's so many things that can keep you from hitting that goal of big, audacious purpose. So most likely you're going to fail, which is going to leave you with disappointment and sadness and a feeling of loss of agency. And so I love big, audacious purpose. I love big goals, but the problem if the goal itself is what makes the task worthwhile, then you're probably going to spend a lot of time doing things you don't like to possibly get to the top of the mountain, but most likely not even get there. And so we want to help people not set themselves up for failure. We want abundance, right? We don't want scarcity. We don't want all or nothing. We don't want, I either become a Major League Baseball player or I don't. We want, I love baseball, so I go to baseball games and write a baseball blog and start a baseball podcast and play in the local league with all my friends. And afterwards, we go out for a beer and we talk about our lives and discuss our problems. That's what we want. Whether you make it to the big leagues or not almost becomes superfluous because you're living out your purpose. You're doing things that you love, the process of doing. The difference between little p and big P. Little p is process-oriented, big P is goal-oriented. And we want you to love the process because even if you reach the goal, you spend 99% of the time in the process and only 1% reaching the goal. And you hit the goal and you're happy and it lasts for a day, a week, or a month and it's gone. But the rest of your life is spent on these climbs. So if you don't enjoy the climb, you're kind of wasting your time.
Yeah, and if we translate that over to the FIRE movement, I do think this is almost the demarcation line or like the difference between the people that are really happy pursuing FIRE versus the people that are not happy pursuing FIRE. The people that are unhappy, it is this kind of big P purpose where the goal, the whole reason they're doing it is to hit that number and then probably leave their career because they're unhappy in their career. Then there are the people that love personal finance, that want to take care of their future self, that even almost somewhat enjoy the process of building their wealth. And it's a total different mentality. And to an extent, like, I think that's probably the difference in where the FIRE movement is somewhat headed and why the, initial pushback on some of the early FIRE movements and kind of where I love to see the FIRE movement go through kind of your podcast, the slow FI, the coast FIs that are out there, the different people that are, I don't know, maybe like the second wave of FIRE movement coming through.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look at it and realize it's somewhat ludicrous. Like, I'm going to spend all my time doing things I hate doing so I can get to some net worth number so that I can then do things that I love doing. Well, what if you could just start doing things you love doing now? And it doesn't mean you have to abandon your financial goals. It just means that you have to start thinking about your financial goals in terms of what lights you up today. Because you know what? You might not hit the 2 million. You might not hit the 4 million. You may die early. I'm a hospice doctor, so I see that all the time. The stock market might crash. You might just about to be there and then have a medical emergency and have to spend some money on it. The number is not happiness. Happiness is having the freedom and agency to do what you want. And a lot of us are realizing while money is a great tool, it's not the only tool. And so let's keep on building that tool. Let's start building our financial independence pathway, but not at the cost of enjoying what we do today, not at the cost of pursuing purpose today, that little p purpose. It doesn't mean you have to work at a job you love. It is very reasonable to say, this job makes me money, it's something I'm good at, and I'm going to do it from 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, but I'm going to fill up the rest of my time with really purposeful stuff. And as I make more money and as I get better financially, maybe I'll pull away from that job a touch and spend a little more time doing these things I love. It doesn't mean that you have to be passionate about your job. In fact, most people aren't. It just means we have to do those jobs intentionally to be living a purposeful life, because that's really the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But here's the big exciting thing. You don't have to wait till you get to the end of the rainbow. You can start enjoying that pot of gold now.
Wait, can you dive into that a little bit more deeper, maybe using a specific example? Because I think whenever I'm talking to a lot of my friends, I'm getting the sense of like, I either am at this job trying to make as much money as possible, or I go the passion play and I do a career path that I'm really in love with, but I know I'm not going to make any money on. And I have been thinking a lot about that and realizing, even through my own career, that there has been a blend of both at different times. And there is opportunity to make small improvements to like what you're doing a little bit more. It's not this like binary choice, like a purpose-driven career path or a high earning career path, and that's the only options you get. There are a few other things that are out there, or things that you can tweak today without even leaving your job to maybe get you a little bit closer to your little p purpose.
So people don't understand we have 3 levers to pull and a bunch of tools, and people just completely miss this, right? So the 3 levers to pull are the art of subtraction, the joy of addition, and substitution. 3 levers, and I'll explain those in a minute. And then we have a bunch of tools. And so the mistake everyone makes, and I see this all the time, is they think money is the only tool to living a good life. It is one of the tools. It certainly affords us some control, some agency so that we can do what we want to do. But it's one of many tools. And really, this conversation also delves into privilege. Like, it's easy for you to say you're a privileged guy, you have a high-paying job, you're now financially independent. Of course you can say this. So let me talk about those levers and tools and how this relates to privilege. There are a lot of people out there who come to me all the time and they say, look, I'm 23 years old. I just got out of college. I tried my best to get a job I was passionate about. I couldn't find it. I've got to pay back my college debt. I took this crappy job that pays the bills. It exhausts me. I work 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. I can't stop this job, but I feel stuck. And so this is a great time to talk to people about the different tools they have available to them. So if you are 23 years old, compare you to me who's 51. So you don't have a mortgage. You're probably not married. You have a lot more energy than me. And because you don't have kids and all these other things to worry about, you probably have a lot more time. So you have more time, more energy. Those are tools. Maybe at 23, you say, look, I hate my job and I feel stuck there. But because I'm young and I'm healthy and I don't have a lot of responsibilities, on Saturday or Sunday, I'm going to go pursue a passionate side hustle. I don't care what it is. In my book, I use the example of someone who used to race bikes when they were a kid, and they knew how to fix their bike because they didn't have much money then, so they were always fixing their bike for the races. So there's a side hustle. On the weekends, you've got a little bit of, you have the tool of energy because you're young and you don't have that many responsibilities. On Saturday, you're going to go to the local raceway and you're going to offer to fix people's bikes, especially in the middle of a race when something goes wrong. They pull over. You're going to help them. And you're going to do that 3 hours a week. We're not talking about a huge time commitment, 3 hours. And I say, if you like doing that, if you're passionate about it, you love bikes, let's do that for 6 months. So what happens after 6 months? Let's say you make some money doing it. That gives you a touch of margin. Then you can use one of those levers, the art of subtraction. Maybe you start working 9 to 5 instead of 8 to 6. Maybe you start working Monday through Thursday instead of Monday through Friday because now you have a little margin. You're making a little bit of money. Great. Maybe that side hustle takes off and all of a sudden you're replacing half of your work week with doing the side hustle you're passionate about. Let's look at the other side. What if you do this for 6 months and you make no money doing it? So you can't use the art of subtraction. You're still going to have to work your 8 to 6, but then you've used the joy of addition. You've added in 3 purposeful hours to your week that otherwise were sat zoned out watching Netflix or doing nothing important. So if we're given a certain amount of time on this earth, your goal should be involve yourself in as much purposeful, exciting activity and as much of that time as possible. You started having these weekends completely free. You've now added the joy of addition and putting in 3 hours of doing something you're passionate about. You didn't make money, but maybe you made connections. Maybe you became a teacher to other people who wanted to learn how to fix their bikes. Maybe all sorts of things came from it. You are ahead of the game. So does that mean all that's lost? You still have to hate your job? No. You can also go to substitution. Maybe you need to work for a different boss in the same company. Maybe you have to work for a different company that does the same thing but is more joyful. Maybe you need to ask to switch your activities at your job from one position to the next. addition, subtraction, substitution, when you use those all together, you start realizing that although I don't have a lot of this tool of money, I've got some other tools and some other levers. And so if you're sitting here telling me, look, I have no tools and I have no levers, I have no time, all I can say is, the Labor Bureau does the American Time survey every, I don't know how many years. But the last time they did it, they found that your average American had 5 hours of free time a day. 5 hours of free time a day. And in fact, people in the lower socioeconomic class tended to have an hour extra. So they had about 6. And so these are all levers. You're going to have to do something. You're going to have to change something. But if you're willing to change something, there's an abundance of opportunity to start exploring things you like. And I don't care how strapped you are. I come from a place of privilege. I've never been strapped. I can't tell you from my learned experience, but I've coached tons of people. I've dealt with tons of hospice people. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of experts on my podcast who started with almost nothing. And most of the time, that's where joy started with them. It was creating margin.
Yeah, and I love in the example that you gave here that it's like 3 hours a week. And that 3 hours is probably so impactful to that person's happiness and joy. And I have found whenever I was really struggling with my career, adding something on the weekends that brought me a lot of joy almost lifted the burden off of my career or my job. And like my job could simply be the avenue that pays my bills. But I think it becomes an issue whenever your job is everything. It's how you pay your bills. It's where you learn and grow skills. It's where you're building a sense of community. It's where you're finding joy and purpose and life. Whenever you're asking your career path or your job to do all of those things, and it's only succeeding at maybe one of those, like maybe even half succeeding at one of those, that's when I think it gets into a bad slippery slope. And then of course, like you're drained, you have no energy, so that you don't want to go and look for another job. You're probably not even the best candidate because the energy that you're putting off as well. Adding just one thing that brings you a lot of joy, I think could lift a lot and change a lot for you over time.
Listen, if I, as a doctor, came to you and I said, I have a pill, and all you have to do is take this pill and you're going to live 20% longer, you're going to be 20% happier, and you're going to have less heart attacks and strokes and all those kind of things, you'd say, of course, give me the pill. Studies show it pretty clearly. You want all these things? Pursue some version of purpose in your life. No one said it has to be big. No one said it has to be audacious. No one said it has to change the world. Find something that lights you up and spend a little time doing it every week.
You used the word find there. And so I know you'll probably correct yourself on this, but you routinely talk about in the book that you don't find purpose, you create it. And I like how action-oriented that is. And I think that brings us to this framework that you talk about, which is called the climb. Can you talk a little bit about the climb and how that plays in part of actually creating your purpose?
So first and foremost, I want to say you're 100% correct. I don't believe you find your purpose. You find purpose anchors or inklings or beckonings, things that you really think you might like. But then more importantly, you have to build a life of purpose around it. In my example where we were talking about the young person who didn't like their 9 to 5, they had to build a life of purpose around bikes, biking, and fixing bikes. It's work. Like they had to go and they had to show up and they had to do the thing.
Did they already know bikes was something that brought them joy? Or like when you talk about kind of finding these anchors too, is there some ideas or strategies that you would suggest to people that this might be a good place to start to explore?
Most definitely. And to put it into context, these purpose anchors are the inklings, and then we build a life of purpose around them. That's the climb, is that creating that purpose around the thing. So the big question everyone asks me is, well, how do I find these anchors? And the truth of the matter is there's a bunch of really good ways. Like when we take the stakes down a little bit and say, boy, it doesn't have to be this big, audacious thing. It just has to be something you enjoy. People realize that purpose is actually abundant. So here are a few ways I suggest in the book. The first and foremost is something I actually talked about in my first book, Taking Stock, which is the life review. With hospice patients, we do what's called the life review. It's a structured series of questions where we review someone's life. We talk about the big goals. We talk about the things they achieve, their big failures, the important people in their life, the big regrets. That's a life review. And a lot of times we talk about regret. So if you want to think about what purpose looks like in your life, what could be a great purpose anchor, do a life review. And let's start thinking about regrets, because unlike my hospice patients, when you're not dying imminently, regret is actually just another name for purpose. So that's a great place to start with a life review, or at least thinking about life regrets. But that's one of many. Another great way is to think about your childhood. So what did our person in our example do? They thought about what lit them up in childhood, and that was bike racing. So a lot of times, before society tells us who we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to do, and before we start worrying about making money, we have these things that just light us up. Kids are wonderful with purpose. They find joy and pursue joy every day until they get older and decide, oh, I better go to school. I better get ready to get a job. I better start doing what society tells me I need to do. So looking back to childhood is another great way. Another way is the art of subtraction. So all of us started at least in a job, or most of us did, and we were making a living, and maybe we're like, wow, I don't love this job. But is there any part of that job you really enjoy? I was burned out as a doctor. I dreaded going into the office every day, but there was this one little piece doing hospice that I got excited about, that I woke up ready for the day when I was doing my hospice activities. So what can I subtract from my work life today and find that there's a piece left that I really enjoy? Maybe that's an anchor. For me, hospice work was an anchor, and I knew that it had something to do with purpose for me, because I realized even if I wasn't getting paid, I'd probably still do the work. So the art of subtraction is another way. So we talked about the life review. We talked about looking at childhood. We talked about the art of subtraction. Another really fun one, if you just have no inkling, no clue whatsoever, is what I call the spaghetti method. Literally, go out and do a bunch of things you don't do. Say yes to people you normally don't say yes to. Sign up for activities that make you a little anxious or worried, and experience them. And if you find joy, even in a moment, doing any of these things, start pursuing those things. See if you can build a climb around them. Some of them you might, others you might not, but that's the wonderful thing about this abundance, is there is nothing lost. You can have something that feels purposeful for a week or a month, and then you can drop it when it no longer feels purposeful for you. And you're probably going to have some of those in your life, and then you're going to have these longer, more enduring things that you probably do for your whole life, like collecting Pokemon cards. All of these things can tie in, and if you let go of all the shoulds and the rules and stick with, what do I love the process of doing? What feels like little p purpose to me? All of a sudden you realize there are tons of things I could do. I look at my own life, man, I love exercising. I love taking long walks. So for me, a climb, a version of purpose is taking a long walk every day by the lake by my house. That fills me with joy. And every day when I go out there and I turn the corner and there's the lake and I have music in my earbuds, I'm listening to classical music, I'm like, this is living. It doesn't matter what I get out of it. It doesn't matter if I become the world's fastest walker or I live to 100 because I'm good in cardiovascular shape. I mean, that's wonderful. I'm happy if I live to 100 because I'm in great cardiovascular shape. But the truth of the matter is, I love doing this. I love reading books. I read sci-fi. No redeeming issue there. I'm not doing self-help. I'm not becoming a better person. I love reading sci-fi. That's a climb in my life. Sounds kind of frivolous. On the other hand, I also love podcasting, which maybe has a chance to touch people's lives and really help people. I love writing books, which is a much longer term, difficult climb. But all of these can be integrated into your life. That's the wonderful abundance here.
Yeah. How do you know if you're pursuing a climb in a healthy way versus an unhealthy way? Like, I felt like you gave a few examples through there, but like, what's a podcasting climb in a healthy way versus doing podcasting in maybe an unhealthy way?
Perfect. I know, and I'll know it's time to, hang up the microphone when I dread doing an interview. Like when I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have this podcast thing I have to do. I have to interview this person for my show. If I get to that point, then I'm wasting my time. That's a climb gone bad, when you no longer enjoy the process. Or let's put it the other way around. If I get so caught up in my podcast, I'm like, oh, look at my numbers. I've had 10,000 people download this episode. I want to get to 100,000 or 1 million. And I get so caught up in that big goal that I'm no longer enjoying things and I'm feeling frustrated because I'm not getting there. So a good way to see that a climb has gone bad is when it becomes 100% goal oriented. Another great version of when a climb goes bad is when you're putting aside things you really want to do, this thing that you don't enjoy as much. So if I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, I've got these 3 books I want to write and I'm so excited and pumped about them, but I can never get to it because I'm stuck interviewing people for my podcast and editing and social media. And I don't even enjoy that stuff nearly as much as I'd enjoy sitting back and writing these books. Then it's probably time I considered transitioning. Maybe not all my time. Maybe I hire someone to do some of my podcast stuff. Maybe I change my podcast to once every 2 weeks instead of once a week or twice a week. Like, there are so many ways I can move this around. I can use the art of subtraction on podcasting and get rid of all I don't like and only leave what I love. Maybe that means getting on my mic once a month, doing a rant for an hour, not editing it, posting it, and whoever listens, great, and whoever doesn't listen, great. But if that then allows me to spend more time, the art of addition, adding in more time writing books, because that's now my joy and purpose, you literally can't lose. As long as you're intentional.
It's almost like you said, set the rules. And I know you said 100% goal oriented. One of my favorite lines in the whole book too, you said our climb should be goal agnostic, but not goal phobic. Like, you're okay, it sounds like, with winning some accolades or looking for some metrics to an extent, but that should be a very small piece of it. And really it should be the journey of the process that is driving why you're doing this, correct?
Listen, I want my book to be a New York Times bestseller, and I'll even market it and promote it, etc. But if my sense of purpose and joy and reason for doing this hangs 100% on whether it becomes a New York Times bestseller or not, I've kind of missed the point. And so I don't even mind big, audacious goals, but they can't be your why. They have to almost be like a happy side effect. I think the same goes for side hustles. You can do your side hustle, and your big audacious goal could be that your side hustle replaces your main hustle and you no longer have to work for someone else. That's wonderful, and that's a great goal. But if that's your main purpose for doing this, you're going to feel thwarted if you don't get exactly there. Let's say you replace half your income and never make it to the big goal of replacing 100% of your income. That's a great accomplishment. And if you enjoy that side hustle, who cares about the goal? You're like living the best life ever. That's why I think we have to be wary of goals, not because they're bad, not because you can't have big, audacious goals, but your sense of happiness and your sense of purpose can't hang on reaching that goal or not.
In your first book, Taking Stock, and then this book, The Purpose Code, you explored a lot of similar ideas. Like, it almost felt like the second volume of this collection of books that you're currently writing right now. Was there a concept that either further developed for you or you changed your mind about whenever you were writing the second book?
It makes sense that it almost feels like a second volume because I wrote the Purpose Code in response to the reaction I got from taking stock. Look, I went and did all sorts of talks about taking stock, and I talked about this idea that we should build up a sense of purpose, identity, and connections, and then create a financial framework around that, as opposed to building a financial framework and leaving all that stuff till later. But I got people who'd come up to me and they'd almost be pissed off. They'd be like, you keep on talking about purpose, and I am sick of people telling me I should find my purpose. I've been searching and searching and searching. I can't find it. It's making me anxious. I don't even think there is such thing. Please stop telling me to do this. And I kind of scratched my head and I said, I've never heard that before. So I went and did the research, and I found 2 things that seemed to contradict each other. The first was that purpose 100% is associated with health, happiness, and longevity. I mean, there's been tons of studies that having this sense of purpose in life really leads to great stuff. On the other hand, there have been other studies that show that 91% of people or more get at least anxiety at some point in their life about purpose. This concept of purpose anxiety, I don't know what my purpose is, and that's making me feel bad, is really common. This is a paradox. And that drove me to really start elucidating what I meant when I said purpose, identity, and connections. And that's what led to this book. So it very much has been an evolution. I knew through taking stock that purpose was utterly important, but I also knew that if I really wanted to say that, I had to give people a clear pathway of A, what that meant, B, how to resolve the paradox, and then C, how do we really build this into our lives in a meaningful way? And so that was the evolution of what the Purpose Code became.
I don't understand how there are 9% out there that don't get purpose anxiety. I feel like I'm always going through this challenge, like every couple of years. Like, I find something that's really lighting me up and I dive into it, and then it seems like I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life right now? So good for the people that it doesn't bother them at all. Was the concept of little p and big P purpose, did you already have that fleshed out in taking stock? It was really interesting researching for you, because I felt like I caught a lot of interviews that were like right in the middle of like, they were probably like post taking stock promo interviews, but at the same time, it seemed like you had already really been drafting and writing, or maybe even finished with the purpose code. Was that concept already thought about and flushed out whenever you were writing Taking Stock?
100%. The whole idea behind Big P and Little P Purpose came after Taking Stock, as people kept pushing me on this purpose issue. And as I did my own research, and I'm like, okay, how is it both, right? How can it be the most important thing as well as incredibly anxiety provoking? And the only answer I could find that made sense, that put it all together, is that we have it wrong. There's at least two types of purpose, if not one. And those two types are almost diametrically opposed. And that's kind of what led to the concept. It's not that I made up these concepts to fit some theory I wanted to fit. It's that I went back and started thinking about my hospice patients and the experts I interviewed on my podcast, and started thinking about the mastermind that I was running around Earn and Invest at the time. I'd been doing coaching with my mastermind group for a good year. So all of this coalesced into what I then expressed as Big P and Little P Purpose. It was my lived experience, both as a hospice doctor, as a podcaster, and as someone who had spent a good year and a half, 2 years promoting a book and talking about purpose.
I love this equation that purpose plus meaning equals happiness. But then you just like hit us with this right hook at the end. And you really spend a lot of the back third of the book talking about community and connection and just the importance of positive social relationships. When did that light bulb hit for you? And how are you thinking about that and building in positive social relationships more intentionally into your life right now?
From Taking Stock, I always said purpose, identity, and connections. And I talked about how you find your purpose, and I talked about identity. And I would always say, when you figure out your purpose and identity, the connections naturally follow, right? Because you're being your best, most authentic self, and you're showing up as that best authentic self. And that is naturally going to connect you to other people. Like a moth to a flame, people will be attracted to you. And so it wasn't a huge jump. And I then also took some of the data. So I've really thought a lot about money and happiness. And anyone who knows a little bit about the data, Kahneman and Deaton did a study that suggested at the time $70,000 was the amount you needed to make every year to be happy, and making more than that didn't make much of a difference. Then this guy Killingsworth came by and did some other data, and he said, no, for certain groups of people, they actually are more happy the more they make. Then Kahneman and Killingsworth reinterpreted the data together and came up again with some of these ideas of, well, maybe making more money does make certain people more happy. I looked at their data, and a lot of it was retrospective, or the parts that were prospective were like they'd be sending texts and emails to people on a regular basis for a few months and then getting the results and then correlating that with overall life happiness and satisfaction, where we had this really great study that's been going on for 70 years that almost everyone references. It's the Harvard Adult Health Study. It's been going on for more than 70 years. It interviewed people like every year, every other year, interviewed their family members, put them through extensive questionnaires. And after 70 years of this amazing prospective long-term study, they found that happiness wasn't connected to money. It wasn't connected to achievements. It wasn't connected to accolades. What it was really connected to mostly was interpersonal relationships. That's that connections, right? I always mentioned purpose, identity, connections. Those are those connections. And so the studies about purpose show that you get more health, more happiness, more longevity. And yet the Harvard study didn't say, look, it's purpose. It said interpersonal connections. What connected with me was this idea that Little P Purpose is actually a wonderful way to develop connections. And so I kind of say at the end of the book, look, it's not even purpose. It's just purpose. Little P Purpose is a great conduit to affecting the world. When you do things that you're passionate about, that light you up, you attract other people. You become part of communities. And when you become part of those communities, you change lives. Maybe that community is your family and it's your children you're changing. Maybe that community is the people you work with on your job. Maybe it's the club you belong to. Maybe it's your podcast listeners. But the point is, when we do these things that light us up, it naturally leads to community. And clearly, community naturally leads to happiness.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on this as a podcaster, too? I just feel like podcasting is such an interesting and a lot of times effective modality for purpose. Like I run a podcast agency, and a lot of my clients tell me, and that kind of key indicator, like I would be podcasting even if it didn't make me any money. And I do feel like that is
boom, little p purpose.
Yeah, that feels like little p purpose. But I was thinking about this when I was finishing up your book too. I'm like, I'm wondering if it's such a good modality. A, because people are usually creating their podcast around an interest of theirs. So it's already like focused in this kind of anchor, and they're building through there. But then it naturally leads to a lot of connection as well. A, with your podcast listeners, and B, with a lot of other podcasters and your podcast guests if you have an interview show too. Like naturally, podcasters in the podcasting industry is very collaborative. So I was even thinking through my own journey and kind of fleshing through like, okay, what would be all of the things that I would do if I never got any money from it whatsoever? And podcasting is for sure one on that list. It doesn't matter. I could be tens of millions of dollars richer right now, and I would still probably continue producing this show at the frequency that I'm producing it right now. Sure, a little bit of a subtraction and addition might come through some of the things that I don't necessarily love about podcasting, a lot of the post-production aspect of it, but I have so much fun podcasting on a regular basis, and I do feel like it's an interesting medium for people to kind of expand their little p purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right. One is you can podcast around a purpose anchor, but also remember that we want to communicate and talk about and engage people who have the same interest we have. So not only are you podcasting about your interest, but you're engaging your guests, you're engaging your community on these issues. So there are plenty of people who have the same joy, but don't love podcasting, don't love public speaking. But guess what? They become your listeners. They don't have to be a podcaster. They can be a listener. And so for those of us who are communicative, who like creating and who like this idea of public speaking or having live open conversations, we're definitely going to fall on the podcaster side. But for every podcaster, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people who dig all the same things, but want to listen to the conversation as opposed to be part of it.
That's totally fair. Jordan, this has been an awesome conversation. You got a great book that should be out right now. So tell people about the Purpose Code and what they can expect if they pick it up.
Purpose Code is available everywhere books are sold. If you have any questions, you can go to jordangrumet.com. That's JORDANGRUMET. The whole point of the book is to make purpose something that's palpable and abundant, and it helps resolve that purpose paradox of how it can be so good for us and yet also cause us anxiety.
Well, you did a great job on that, Jordan. Final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't normally covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
Oh, come on. That's easy. I teach them about purpose.
All right.
I teach them about little p purpose.
I gave you the layup there. I'd be interested, though. You got 16 weeks with them. Let's call it an hour a week. How do you start to actually put a syllabus or a framework around that class?
Well, I've been lucky enough to write the book, right? So I have a lot of ideas where we start with the purpose paradox, why it's a paradox, why it causes us problems, why people feel so lost about it, what is purpose anxiety, how we resolve that paradox by breaking up little p purpose and big P purpose, how we then pursue little p purpose, how we find these purpose anchors, how we then can build these climbs around the purpose anchors, and last but not least, why it all matters. Like, what is being part of a climb? How does it impact the world? How does it create legacy? Why do we need a bunch of people out there involved in little p purpose? And so I think I could really create a nice curriculum around that. And that's really what the book is chapter by chapter going into what some of those classes would be.
Would you do any more like hands-on or kind of field training? Like, would you at least somewhat force them to start a climb to some degree? I'm curious, like, how would you do that part?
So a good part of the book actually has exercises in it after almost every chapter. And those exercises are really prompts for you to start physically taking action. So I always say this with books is it's really easy to get into the high level and the philosophical, but most people reading your book want to know, okay, what's step one, what's step two, what's step three. And so for instance, I think a lot of our time would be spent finding these purpose anchors by going through the process of things like our life review, of thinking about childhood, of using the spaghetti method and saying, okay, you've got till next week. I want you to sign up for something you've never done before and see what that feels like. I think all of that can be integrated into action. And so the book is meant to spur you into action. It's meant to, on some level, especially with the exercises, to be almost a class that motivates you, that says, oh, there's this weird, ephemeral, high-level thing called purpose, and I know it's important, but I have no idea where to begin. The book should really help you not only philosophically understand why it's important, but also give you some of those first steps in how to begin. And a lot of the stories in the book trace out how people went about finding their anchors and then building a life of purpose around them.
It'd be such a killer class. Once again, friends, this is Jordan Grumet. He is the author of The Purpose Code, out anywhere you can buy books right now. Jordan, thanks so much for spending so much time on the podcast. This was an awesome conversation and an excellent read. I'm so stoked to tell people about this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, I appreciate your kind words. If you want to leave us a rating and review on your podcast player right now, that would absolutely make my day. If you want to find episode show notes, our blog, and other great resources, head over to tsirpodcast.com. If you have follow-up questions, an idea for a future episode, or just want to say hi, we have a contact form on our website, and those messages go straight into my inbox, and I promise you, I will reply. But all right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I love you all, and you're not alone. Let's keep making it through our struggles together.
Mm-hmm.